Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel BNB Daily Spoiler. Identity Shocker. RJ exposed Luna, pretending to be Dylan.
You're Luna, and I know you're impersonating Dylan. RJ is aware of the reality. RJ Forrester's ability to read people has always been strong. It had less to do with wealth and more to do with survival. If you're raised in a home where secrets are valued highly, you will learn to be critical of others. In the quiet backstage area of a small charity event where Dylan was supposed to display a capsule collection, the scenes were all over the place tonight. He heard their too clean laugh from a curtained nook and smelled them in the stale smell of the dressing room. The way the woman posing as Dylan folded a napkin was so familiar to him that it should have comforted him, but instead it made a sound deep within his chest. The cooling scandal, how tabloids had fabricated a story to try and turn Dylan into a pawn in the Forrester orbit, and how a single social media video had led to 1,000 assumptions had consumed his thoughts all day. RJ, I had hoped that this evening would be a comfort, a small stage for sincerity. He made a self-promise to be in the front row. Rather, in the antiseptic light behind the curtain, he was accused by his own instincts. An interview was being conducted by Dylan. No, the woman everyone thought was Dylan. The cameras seemed like predators. The interviewer's voice was clear and sympathetic, like a man who knows how to get something out of a creature without frightening it. The woman smiled. Her smile was a polished, charming parable that many people had grown accustomed to seeing on television. RJ Dylan had known her long enough to recall the precise way she licked the inside of her cheek before answering a challenging question. Time and intimacy had shown him subtle, sheath-like tendencies, such as the way she tugged at a seam when she was anxious, the tiny hitch in her laugh that she kept a secret, and the odd tilt of her head when she was thinking of a sleeve instead of a sentence. The woman grinning tonight was too excited to complete the sentence correctly. The head tilt was borrowed, the laugh was loud where it should have been quiet, and the habit was a beat-off. Like a detective testing a theory, he drew nearer, deflecting attention from himself. The interviewer asked about the controversy. "How do you manage being the center of so much attention?" he inquired. "By staying true to my art," she clarified. Dylan's voice had a husk to it, a subtle crack of confidence, and it glinted. The voice wasn't right. Not bad in terms of accents and diction, but wrong in the interior register of someone who didn't remember the words. RJ walked into the curtain corner between two gasping assistants and a stylist who seemed to have invented patience, pausing between the woman and the interviewer. He knew the risks of making an accusation too soon, and he also realized that if this was a hoax, it needed to be stopped before the press devoured it and ruined Dylan's life forever. "Pardon me," he said, sounding like a man who had never learned to hide. "May I speak with Dylan?" "Of course," she replied, leaning in to kiss his cheek in the practiced way of acquaintances who know how to appear personal in front of cameras. Her hand brushed his, as if meeting him were a stage performance. The woman's expression briefly flashed before settling into polished curiosity. Retracting, RJ said, "Dylan," more firmly now. The hand was just as warm as any other, but the fingers were painted in a peculiar way. He blinked and stepped back. The interviewer pointed his camera at them, but the woman remained composed in spite of the blur of lights and lenses. "I'm Dylan," she whispered, her words falling like a penny into an aquarium, rippling, meaningless by the surface. "RJ, I felt a room contract. This was a personal matter. Dylan had endured enough this year. Rumors, a controversy that threatened her career, and a pregnancy she had attempted to hide. Whoever this was had not only crossed a professional boundary, but also committed intimate theft. He had seen this story before in previous lifetimes. A woman claiming what wasn't hers, using a substitute to hide an inconvenient fact. He yelled, "You're Luna," and the name echoed between them like an unabated accusation. The woman, Luna, stopped, the mask slipping for the first time, her eyes flashing with horror and recognition, as if she'd been caught reading a page she'd vowed no one would ever see. She opened and closed her mouth, then tried an exaggerated smile. "No," she answered, "I'm Dylan." "You're Luna," RJ repeated. He had seen Luna before. She had been a minor figure in LA's ecology for some time, an ambitious assistant to an assistant, a woman who knew which meetings had snacks and how to route a message so that the right person received it. Luna was the kind of worker who blended into the background and then used her invisibility as a technique. RJ had assumed she was harmless, but she hadn't been. A comet's worth of calculations flashed across Luna's features as her face went pale. How are you? You're a mimic. You have Dylan's appearance, but not her weight of terror. You learned a few of her habits. Her hand gestures are a copy, not a memory. You're not familiar with the secret jokes. You're not familiar with the lullaby she sings while sewing late at night. People in the hallway had stopped. The interviewer's camera continued to roll, because cameras always do. A tweet would follow, a headline could be imagined, and there was no way to keep this a secret. You don't get to decide who I am, Luna shot back, her voice sounding like that of a woman whose life had consistently been rejected. I can be whoever I want. Luna's mouth was small and harsh, and she quickly went from pale to furious. RJ was given a lot of training on how to deliver a hit without using violence. Not at someone else's expense, he said, not by stealing someone's life. Luna closed ranks as she entered. Dylan left, she said sternly. She left town. She gave me an opportunity. I made use of it. To police me, who are you? You Forrester types always believe you get to make the rules. RJ. He took a step back at something she said. Anger was one thing, but entitlement was quite another. In actuality, though, he was more interested in facts than accusations. He said, "Where's Dylan? Tell me where she is now if you're positive she left. Are you pregnant? Has she left her phone here? Show me any evidence that you are Dylan." "I don't need to prove anything to you," Luna told me, then whispered softly, "You never saw the money." Luna's expression stiffened. She had prepared, RJ accomplished, in anticipation of being challenged. She tilted her head in imitation of studying. Money was the other side of this nightmare, and it hit him like a cold breeze. If Luna had been paid to pretend to be Dylan, if a publicist desperate to save a story had bought the Forrester rumor mill, then there was more going on than identity theft. There was a plot to remove a real woman from her own life. "You had help," RJ said plainly. "This was arranged. Some people need to survive," Luna said, her eyes blazing. Someone had to carry out her responsibilities if Dylan was not going to be present. Contracts had to be fulfilled. I am able to sew. I am able to speak. I am able to grin. They hired me to stand in. "Who?" asked RJ demanded. "Who gave you Dylan's calls to answer? Who hired you? Who knew what Dylan would say about her life and pregnancy?" The curtains behind them rustled, and Steffi arrived first with a sense of drama akin to a storm radar. Hope and Liam followed, their expressions a map of concern, and with them came a wave of recognition. This was not a personal quirk, but a deceit that was going to become dangerous and public. Steffi looked at Luna with cold calculation, as if she was looking for names and finality. Luna's mouth opened, and she looked smaller. "I don't," she began, but for reasons only she knew, she bit her tongue and turned away. The truth always has a price. She had accepted the script and money that had been promised to her. "You understand the gravity," he said calmly. "Dylan has the right to her own life." "RJ," I felt the floor shift. "She cannot be made to vanish from it." "You don't understand what it means to be invisible," Luna shot back, making her case not for Dylan, but for herself as a woman who was told she had only one option and decided to take it. "I'm not a bad person for accepting a job." "No," replied RJ, "you're not the bad guy. You're the person who made a terrible choice. But choices have consequences." He thought of Dylan, the real Dylan, who had been struggling for the past few months to maintain his composure in the face of harsh public expectations. He recalled the pregnancy test she had concealed and the late-night hours she had spent sewing sleeves while sipping coffee. He thought about how brave she was to keep anything at all a secret. He said it again. "Tell me who hired you," since the truth demands a name. Luna's eyes scanned the corridor as if searching for a way out. She finally said, "I was paid by a PR firm," in a scratchy voice. "They claimed it would help someone who needed to be away for a long time. They explained that it would be a contract to keep me busy. They told it would be temporary." Hope's mouth tightened. "Which public relations firm?" Luna said softly, "You can't make me say," sounding worn out. "You can tell us now, or we'll go public," he said, leaning in close enough to feel the heat at the base of her throat. "We will reveal if this is a hoax to manipulate Dylan's narrative. We'll track down the company and ensure Dylan receives all the information he needs." Luna's shoulders slumped as she said, "Fine," her words ejecting like a small concession. It was a boutique firm called Marquette and Bell. It was both menacing and promising. They claimed to be on behalf of a client who required a body double to handle appearances while she attended to a personal matter. They asked for a discreet person. I kept a low profile. RJ. The legal team didn't have the name until I did. Marquette and Bell was well known for being a small PR company with strong social ties and a history of swiftly repairing reputations. It was more than a scandal if they had staged an impersonation. It was an erasure crime. He looked at Hope and Steffi. "Get Carter," he said. "Get Ridge. Until Dylan is secure, we must maintain control." Luna's expression was neither relieved nor contrite as she grasped the hem of her jacket, as though she had been freed from a burden. She partially begged, "You'll make me the villain," in response. "You'll be whatever you choose to be now," RJ says. Halted. "You can help us fix this. You can tell the truth. Or you can try to hide it, and we'll expose it." A slight human flash tugged at Luna's chest. "And Dylan?" she asked, using the name as a prayer instead of a brand for the first time. "What will happen to her?" "What will happen to Dylan?" RJ inquired. "Is that she will reclaim everything that is hers. Her image, her story. If she has a child, he or she will be protected from such exploitation," he said, softening his tone. "We will ensure her safety." RJ stayed where he was, staring at the woman who dared to portray another woman's life as if it were a costume. But inside the corridor, things started to change. Phones were pulled out. Carter would call it legal. Ridge would handle family damage management. Hope and Steffi would make sure Dylan was safe. He continued, "You can try to justify what you did, but if another person's life is the price of survival, you owe them more than money. You owe them the truth." Luna's eyes filled with tears. Her outrage was replaced, for once, by a sort of weary humility. "I thought I was getting out of my life," she softly acknowledged. "They gave me the impression that I could change places. I thought I could be someone else for a while and stop going unnoticed." "You could have been noticed without stealing," RJ says. "You could have begged for training, asked for help, or found a job. You chose falsehood." Sheila let out a laugh that sounded like a balloon popping after lurking at the edge of the crowd with the attentiveness of a drama enthusiast. "You people always think you own the truth," she retorted, her eyes gleaming with hatred. "If the world only eats faces, you might as well take one. Maybe Luna is right." "RJ." He glared at her. "Not this time," he answered. "Not with Dylan." Soon after, the investigators showed up. Attorneys, a Marquette and Bell public relations representative who was concerned about the appearances and demanded a private conversation. And, finally, Dylan herself, in the most unimpressive way imaginable. She had shorter hair, suspicious eyes, and a smaller stature than they had anticipated. For a while, RJ. I can no longer breathe. His chest lurched at the sight of her unborrowed and unimitated. Hope and Steffi followed Dylan into the hallway. Her expression went blank when she saw Luna, a common reaction for anyone who has encountered something that must be clarified before it can be comprehended. "Luna?" she asked, seemingly trying to pronounce the name. Luna lowered her head and began to cry. It wasn't dramatic. It was small and realistic. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't know how to be seen." After staring at her for a while, Dylan turned to look at RJ. "Did you know?" she asked in a thread-like voice. "I had my suspicions," he said honestly, "but I wanted to be sure before I forced it into the light." They made decisions that evening. Luna would cooperate. Marquette and Bell would be subpoenaed. The press would spin and gnash, but Dylan would lead rather than be led. She would pursue charges, demand an investigation, and seize control of any story with the clarity of someone who had already seen how fragile that commodity is. RJ. The corridor fell silent as I followed her to her car. Neither of them spoke for a long time, and the city's nighttime sounds were as faint as a breath held. RJ could sense the price of what had happened, how easily public opinion had been exchanged like goods on a shelf. "Are you all right?" At last, he asked. Dylan looked at him in bewildered appreciation. "I will be," she answered, "but I am tired of being acted upon." "We'll fix it," he answered. "You get to choose the story, not by concealing what happened, but by raising your voice the loudest." Driving out of the backstage corridor, RJ observed that the press lights were blazing like far-off constellations. "I experienced the slow, burning happiness of someone who has stopped a theft. It wasn't even a resolution, let alone a victory. Lawsuits, camera apologies, and the kind of arduous legal endeavor that turns truth in a paper would all be present. But tonight, in a town known for its chaos, there was a clarity that felt almost tidy. The future of Luna was still unknown. Charges for impersonation and any contract violations she had enabled would probably be brought against her. Even so, there was a ray of hope for her. She could decide to help Dylan, provide testimony, and describe how the impersonation was put together. She may become more accountable and less secretive. Meanwhile, Dylan would heal herself in the same manner that she had always done, by working and quietly creating. Instead of using the rumors that had tried to define her, she would make a line that represented the woman she was. RJ would be present because he was committed to the truth, not to manipulate the story. The story unfolded in the predictable, occasionally brutal arc of media and law in the weeks that followed. Bell and Marquette were exposed for their self-serving choice to employ such a morally repugnant tactic. Lawsuits were filed with the efficiency of money-hungry law firms, and apologies were scrawled on stationery and then secretly destroyed. Away from the news and the lawsuit, however, there was something more subdued happening. A woman who could be herself once more, a mimic who would have to accept her choices, and a man who used his eye for seams to stop identity theft. Months later, on a rainy afternoon, Dylan stood by herself in her studio, staring out at the drops, tracing the window pane with ink-stained fingers. In a sort of self-sequestration, she had a small box on the shelf with her personal belongings and a stack of designs on the table. When she opened the box, she found an unsent letter from Luna that was shivering with regret and folded. She didn't cry. She discovered that truth was a resource rather than a weapon. It was essential, occasionally cruel, but ultimately something to build upon. RJ knocked and entered. He brought coffee and extended an offer rather than a demand. "How is the line?" he asked. "Coming along," she said, and then, after a pause, "Thanks." He smiled, and the room felt less like a battlefield and more like a place where people could be held accountable while also having room to grow. "We did the right thing," he explained simply. They were both aware that in Los Angeles, and particularly in the Forrester orbit, doing the right thing was frequently the most difficult and visible. Tonight, there were no cameras in the studio. There were only two people. Work was spread out like a promise on the table, and there was a clear, steady sense that a reclaimed life was worth more than the headline.